a prequel centered on the centuries-old feud between two races and how Lucian, the first ever werewolf who can take a human form, led the slaves, Lycans, to victory against the tyrant vampire King Victor. Set in the early 15th century, two species were created: the aristocratic vampires and the werewolves, feral beasts with infectious blood and unable to take on human form. There were three original Grand Elders who ruled the entire vampire population, and the tyrant vampire King Victor of the castle Corvinus was among them. The vampires and the werewolves had always despised one another, and 10 decades after the creation of the two races, a war had begun brewing. Victor increased his vampire army and created a legion of death dealers, vampire warriors formed to hunt down werewolves. After a raid, Victor captured several werewolves, and among them was a pregnant werewolf who gave birth to a seemingly human child. An idea formed inside Victor's head, and he killed only the mother while the child was spared. Victor observed the growth of the werewolf child that was named Lucian and discovered that Lucian had the ability to shift between a werewolf and a human form. Lucian also possessed a great strength that no other werewolf ever possessed before. With this newfound discovery, Victor utilized Lucian's infectious blood to form his own immortal slaves that he believed would be much better compared to the werewolves. He had his human slaves thrown into the cage of a hungry Lucian for him to feed on, and the humans were turned into a new species called the Lycans, with Lucian being the first of the bloodline. Unlike the werewolves, the Lycans had the capability to think, and Victor was able to easily enslave them, as they are capable of feeling fear for their vampire masters and comprehending orders. The Lycans were also put as the guards during daylight hours with extra precautions to prevent them from escaping. This is to serve as temporary replacement for the vampires as the sun burns them. Victor had assumed that all was well, unaware that the child he raised as a slave would battle against him in the future. Lucian had grown and served as a blacksmith for the vampire army, slightly above the other Lycans, but still a slave just like them. One night, Victor's daughter Sonia was rushing back to the castle Corvinus after going on a werewolf hunt without her father's permission. She was being chased by a group of werewolves, and Lucian, who had sensed her arrival followed by the smell of werewolves, protected Sonia on her way in. After killing the werewolves to protect Sonia, Lucian was asked by Victor if he had any negative feelings towards killing his own kind. Lucian's answer was no. He wasn't bothered by having to kill his own predecessors. Lucian was convinced that werewolves were indeed mindless and needed to be eliminated. This mindset had been instilled in him at a young age. After his short talk with Lucian, Victor followed Sonia and chastised her for not listening to him when he told her not to hunt down werewolves, as it was the job of the death dealers. Sonia had always been rebellious, and she didn't agree with most of her father's decisions. Another reason why Sonia was distant from her own father was because she had a secret she was keeping from him. Growing up, Lucian and Sonia developed an attraction for each other, and they soon began dating secretly. The two of them would always sneak out and meet in their secret hiding place where no one would catch them. However, things changed when they were caught one evening. There was a council meeting, and they were talking about their plans regarding the safety of the castle Corvinus from werewolves. Culliman suggested giving some of the Lycans privileges so they can patrol during the daytime, and the chances of them escaping would be slim because they would be able to live a sophisticated life. Culliman wanted to ask Sonia's opinion on his suggestion, knowing full well that she would agree, and Victor would be convinced to do the same. So Victor ordered one of his trusted men, his notary Andreas Tanis, to get Sonia from her room so they could get her opinion. However, Sonia wasn't in her room. Unbeknownst to everyone, Lucian and Sonia had met up in their secret place to consummate their love. Laying beside each other, Sonia asked Lucian what he truly felt about the werewolves. Having grown up in the castle Corvinus, Lucian was also convinced that werewolves are indeed mindless beasts that needed to be put down. Lucian then revealed the key he had made to unlock the shackles around his neck. Lucian was planning on removing his shackles and escape, and he wanted Sonia to come with him. However, Sonia was afraid that her father would hunt Lucian down and made Lucian promise never to use the key. Lucian was upset, as he didn't want to be treated like an animal anymore, but he couldn't be without Sonia and decided to listen to her. Sneaking out of their secret place and parting ways, the couple failed to notice Tanis, who had been searching for Sonia, watching them. For unknown reason, Tanis didn't tell Victor anything and even lied about Sonia refusing to leave her room. One family of the human nobles Victor was willingly partnering with for silver and other resources was nearing the castle Corvinus, and Victor's strongest warriors were tasked with protecting them from the werewolves. Lucian tried to convince Sonia not to go with the warriors, but Sonia, always the stubborn one, reassured him that she would be fine. Once Sonia and the vampire warriors had left, Tanis approached Lucian and whispered to him a warning that let Lucian know that Tanis knew about his secret relationship with the Vampire King's only daughter. Lucian then sensed the presence of a huge number of werewolves and escaped to protect Sonia. Lucian and the vampires were outnumbered, and one family of the humans that were supposed to visit the castle Corvinus were killed. Lucian used the key to unlock his shackles that were preventing him from shifting. Once the shackles were off, Lucian shifted into a werewolf and let out a mighty roar that successfully caused the werewolves to cease their attacks. The werewolves oddly seemed fearful of Lucian and retreated. Just as the werewolves had gone, 2 arrows pierced on Lucian's back, forcing him to shift back to his human form. Victor arrived with more men, and even though Lucian had protected his daughter, Victor was still livid that Lucian removed his shackles. Sonia was unable to defend Lucian from her father, and Lucian was punished for removing his shackles. While Lucian was being whipped for all to see, one of the Lycan slaves attempted to move forward in an attempt to help him, only to be knocked on the ground. Colonel tried to convince Victor to stop Lucian's punishment because it might stir up the other Lycans, but Victor didn't listen. Lucian was thrown into prison, where he met the human slaves that were brought along the human nobles. One of the slaves, Reyes, reminded Lucian what happened in the woods, how the werewolves seemed to listen to Lucian. However, even Lucian himself had no idea why it happened. Sonia sneaked into the prison a while later, and they tried coming up with any idea how Lucian would escape. Lucian then remembered Tanis and informed Sonia that Tanis knew of their relationship but didn't say anything to Victor. This meant that Tanis wanted something, and Sonia needed to find out what that something was. The other human nobles that were supposed to bring their shares to Victor had arrived, but only brought disappointment to Victor when he noticed that the humans only bought a small amount of silver. Janosch, the human noble who owned the largest silver mine, explained that his mine had been overrun by his workers, who turned into beasts. When Victor expressed his disappointment, Janosch was in disbelief and disrespected Victor. The latter killed Janosch as a warning to the other human nobles. Meanwhile, the vampire guards were feeding the imprisoned Lycans, and a fight broke out as Lycans tried to get a bit of the food they were given. Lucian broke the fight and reminded everyone that their enemies are the vampires who enslaved them and treated them like animals. Lucian encouraged everyone to either stay as slaves or be Lycans who would fight for their freedom. Victor was planning on having Lucian executed the next day after the human slaves had been turned into Lycans. While he ignored Coloman's warning, Victor had felt threatened by the idea that there were possibilities of the Lycans revolting against him because of Lucian, and so he wanted Lucian gone. Sonia didn't want that to happen, so she cornered Tanis and demanded to know what he wanted in exchange for keeping their secrets. Tanis was more than willing to help Lucian and Sonia in exchange for a seat on the council. Sonia agreed to give Tanis her seat on the council, and Tanis let Lucian and Sonia meet in private. Sonia told Lucian to escape as soon as possible before he gets executed, and she promised to meet him at a clearing by the river in 3 days. Lucian was brought back to his cell and saw Reyes, along with his fellow human slaves, being brought out of their cells before Tanis appeared from above his cell, throwing him the key for his shackles. Meanwhile, Reyes and the other human slaves had been forcibly turned into Lycans. They were brought back to their cell once they were turned, and Lucian told him about his plan of escaping with the other Lycans. When Vampire Overseer Costa arrived, the Lycans from the cell beside Lucian's cell told him that Lucian had escaped. Out of panic, Costa unlocked Lucian's cell and entered to confirm if Lucian really escaped, unaware that he had fallen into a trap. Lucian, in his werewolf form, suddenly appeared and mauled Costa. Using Costa's key, the Lycans were freed, and the vampires guarding the cells were outnumbered and overpowered by the angry Lycans. Lucian, Reyes, and some of the Lycans successfully escaped. Some were killed before they could, and the others who were unable to escape were brought back to their cells. Lucian promised to come back for them, and as he stepped out of Castle Corvinus, he saw Victor watching him with hatred in his eyes as the sun rose, preventing the vampires from going after Lucian and the Lycans. Victor interrogated Tanis about the key he was tasked to keep, and Tanis answered that it was hidden in the armory. Victor wanted Tanis to be killed, but as a punishment, the latter pleads for the vanquished king to check the armory to prove that the key was indeed still in there. At the armory, Tanis nervously looked for the replica key he had hidden in the armory and showed it to the Vampire King, who decided to leave Tanis alone upon seeing the key. Lucian and the Lycans camped out on the clearing in the woods, and Lucian gave everyone a choice, whether they wanted to run and hide or stay and fight. Reyes informed Lucian about the other states west of the vampire, and Lucian told him to go there to see how many would join them. Lucian then headed to the werewolves' lair, and the werewolves surrounded him, not quite trusting his presence inside their lair. Meanwhile, Victor had discovered the secret place Lucian and Sonia used to meet up in, and went to his daughter's room to interrogate her. Lies easily fell off Sonia's lips, but Victor already had suspicions and only needed confirmation. So he bit into his daughter's neck and saw her memories, confirming that she was indeed in a secret relationship with a Lycan. Victor screamed in anger and hit Sonia, causing her to fall on her bed. Sonia knew that there was no use to lying anymore and admitted that she was in love with Lucian, and Victor could only walk out in anger and betrayal. Lucian returned to the council, who were worried after learning that Lucian's group had recruited slaves from other states and stolen the contents of the state's armories. Coleman was worried that their remaining Lycans would revolt against them now that Lucian had escaped with some of them, and suggested bringing Lucian back. Victor was confident that Lucian would return of his own free will because of Sonia. It had been 3 days, and Sonia hadn't arrived yet. Lucian was getting worried, and the other Lycans were unsure that Sonia could be trusted. She was the Vampire King's daughter after all. Lucian sensed the arrival of a female vampire, but Lucian's happiness didn't last long when he realized it was Luca, a highly placed member of the Vampire Coven and the lady-in-waiting of Sonia. Luca had always been loyal to Sonia, and she knew of Lucian and Sonia's relationship. Luca sneaked out of the castle to inform Lucian that Sonia had been arrested after Victor discovered about their relationship. Once Luca returned to the castle, Lucian prepared himself to rescue Sonia. Reyes tried to warn him about the obvious trap, but Lucian was adamant on rescuing Sonia, refusing to let his lover suffer, let alone die, without him by her side. Lucian gave Reyes a reality check that the Lycans followed the idea of being free, not him. Lucian wanted Reyes to hold the Lycans together until he gets back and lead them if he doesn't. Lucian sneaked into the Castle Corvinus and found Sonia locked in her room. The lovers embraced each other, and Lucian led Sonia out of the room. Just minutes after the lovers had gone, Victor's elite guards found the dead guards outside of Sonia's room and reported to the Vampire King that Sonia had escaped. Lucian and Sonia used the underground tunnel they used to go through to secretly meet up, but were trapped by the flames the vampire guards had set, leaving only one way out. Lucian was the first to jump out, followed by Sonia, and the two of them fought against Victor's guards. Things were going well until Victor appeared with more guards. Lucian had been cornered by guards holding crossbows with silver bolts, which are very effective against werewolves and Lycans. Sonia, on the other hand, had to fight her own father. Sonya never wanted to defeat her own father. She only wanted to be free with Lucian. She tried convincing Victor to let them go and revealed that she was pregnant with Lucian's baby, a union of the bloodlines. Victor believed that the baby inside Sonya was a monstrosity and held a knife against Sonya's throat while Lucian was being dragged away, unable to do anything to help Sonya. Lucian and Sonya were imprisoned, and the former apologized for leaving, resulting in Sonya being severely punished by her own father. Sonya reassured Lucian that it was her choice to be with him, and she was willing to go against her own father for him. Lucian screamed in anger when the guards took Sonya to the council but was hit by a silver bolt before he could turn. Sonya was brought to the council, followed by Lucian, who was pushed down the floor. Sonya was accused of committing high treason against the Vampire Coven, and the whole council, including Victor, voted to sentence her to death. As Sonya was brought to the chamber, Lucian begged for Victor to help Sonya, but the Vampire King could only look down in shame and grief, his position as the Vampire King and his own selfish pride winning over his love for his daughter. As if killing her as a punishment wasn't enough, Sonya had to watch a guard beat Lucian with a silver whip, the latter screaming in pain as he was chained in front of Sonya, who was tied to a stake. Everyone left the chamber, and a hole in the roof was slowly opened. Lucian told Sonya to look at him, and they confessed their love for each other one last time before Sonya was burned alive after being exposed to the sun. Lucian loudly cried as he witnessed his lover's death, and he didn't stop until he fainted. Night came, and Victor entered the chamber, staring at his daughter's burnt body and taking her necklace. Lucian had regained consciousness by then, and the sight of Victor in front of his lover's corpse caused him to lose control of himself. Victor ordered his guard to fetch his silver knife as Lucian shifted into his werewolf form. Lucian broke free from his chains and clawed at Victor. When the guards arrived, Lucian stole the necklace and jumped out of the window. Guards hit him with the silver bolts, and the pain caused him to let out a roar loud enough for all Lycans and werewolves to hear. Everyone, vampires and Lycans, waited in suspense as they listened to the growls coming from the forest. Rays and the Lycans saw the werewolves heading towards the vampire stronghold and joined them, some of them shifting into their werewolf forms on their way to the castle Corvinus. A war ensued, and Rays helped Lucian before heading to the cells to free the imprisoned Lycans. The Vampire Council had been attacked by the werewolves, and Victor ordered Tanis to go to the Elders while he and Death Dealers got ready for battle. Lucian's eyes zeroed in on Victor, and he went after his main target. Lucian got distracted by a few vampires, and when he looked back at Victor, he realized that the Vampire King had fled and pursued him. Finding him, Lucian and Victor fought while Tanis escaped with the Elders, who had been put in the hibernation chamber. Lucian and Victor reached a shaft in the middle of their fighting, and Lucian exposed Victor to sunlight by destroying the shaft's roof. Surrounded by sunlight with nowhere to go, Victor failed to dodge the chains Lucian threw at him. The chains wrapped around Victor, and Lucian stabbed him through the mouth with a sword and watched as Victor fell under the water below the shaft. Lucian walked out, and the Lycans cheered upon seeing him. Rays told him that the war was over, but Lucian knew better. The war they had won was just the beginning of many. On a vampire ship, Victor survived the wound inflicted on him, and he entered one of the Elders' sleeping chambers that Tanis had brought. The ending scene of Underworld. Rise of the Lycans showed the opening scene of the first Underworld scene. Vampire Craven revealed to Selene, a death dealer, that the Lycans didn't kill her family. Victor did. However, upon seeing her, Victor spared her life as she reminded him of Sonya, his own daughter, whom he condemned to death.